Came the dawn on Midsummer's Day, and as the sun rose gently above Crow Wood, it was greeted for the first time in years by a chorus of birdsong. For the creatures of the forest, the days of hiding were over. No longer was there need to crouch in the shadows, to move along secret ways, to live from one day to the next in fear and trembling. For Giant Grum was gone, and life had returned to Crow Wood. Of course, all the talk in the wood was of the three gnomes, and particularly old Dodder, who had brought the great god Pan to their rescue. But though all sorts of celebrations were being planned, the gnomes had decided to move on quietly without any fuss. The whole purpose of their expedition was to search for Cloudberry, and they'd already spent far too long in Crow Wood. Early that morning, they'd taken the dragonfly from her hiding place at the edge of the wood and prepared her for the journey. She seemed to have suffered no great damage at Moss Mill, and at Dodder's suggestion, they'd added a mast and a sail made out of 2 sleeping bags. On purpose, they'd kept their departure plans a secret, and only one creature was there to see them off: Squirrel.
Don't forget to look out for us in the autumn when we come downstream again,
called Dodder. And the figure of Squirrel grew smaller and smaller as they headed upstream. A while later, and they'd reached the wood pool, a large expanse of water set around with trees. It was here that they sat back and enjoyed the journey, for the breeze freshened, the sail filled, and with water chuckling under her dipping bow, the dragonflies sped through the water. At the far end of the pool, the breeze dropped away, and they saw that the folly ran out of a long tunnel of trees. This, they found, was a green and twilight world, where the deep black water was almost without movement, and framed with tall branching ferns which came right down to the water's edge. Then, rounding a corner, they saw before them an ornamental stone bridge, an old weathered bridge covered in moss. To one side, long festoons of ivy were draped down over the water, and all about, the air was filled with the thin, sweet song of willow warblers. Drifting under the stone arch, Baldmoney brought the dragonfly scraping gently against the green stonework. Above them, protruding from crevices, were green hart's-tongue ferns, and on one a snail with black and yellow banded shell made slow progress through the shadows. It was while he was watching the snail, however, that Baldmoney spotted something else up there on the stonework. There was a rough drawing of a cloud, beside it 3 berries, and underneath a large arrow pointing upstream. "Look!" he called to the others, and they all stared in amazement. "It's Cloudberry's sign," said Sneezewort, "and the arrow means he's upstream, ahead of us." Half an hour later, and a thread of blue smoke drifted up through the trees above the bridge, and with it the delicious smell of fried minnows. The gnomes had, of course, taken a risk by lighting a fire by day, but they were in high spirits. They'd rid Crow Wood of Giant Grum, the sun was shining, and above all, they'd seen Cloudberry's message.
Oh, from now on, said Dodder, we must keep a sharp eye out for any other signs of Cloudberry and...
He stopped in mid-sentence, as a strange whirring sound fell upon their ears, the like of which they'd never heard before. "It's coming from upstream," said Baldmoney, and they all peered through the long grass, wondering just what it could be. And they didn't have long to wait. There, heading downstream towards them, was a ship, the most beautiful ship they'd ever seen. She was moving fast through the water, her spotless paintwork gleaming in the sun, a sparkling wash spreading out in a broad V astern. She had a large red and black funnel, 2 heavy anchors at her bow, and above them, in large letters, the name Jeannie Deans. Baldmoney and Dodder were so absorbed by this incredible sight that they didn't hear the soft footfall on the bank behind them. And it was a terrified Sneezewort who said suddenly, "Look!" They turned round, and to their horror saw a face peering at them through the branches. 3 circles of ripples spread across the water, and 3 lines of bubbles marked the underwater route of the gnomes as they made for safety in the shadows under the bridge. "He was looking right at us," said Sneezewort. "Yes, but he was smiling," answered Baldmoney. "So perhaps he means no harm." "Shh," whispered Dodder. "He's coming closer." The young boy had bent down to retrieve his boat and was now examining the fire with its small frying pan full of minnows. And then he noticed their own boat, the Dragonfly.
"Now we've had it,"
whispered Dodder. But the boy didn't touch the Dragonfly. He looked at it closely without taking it from the water, and then settled down to wait. An hour later, and the gnomes were shivering with cold after so long in the water, and poor Sneezewort could no longer suppress the tickling sensation in his nose. The noise of that sneeze in the confined space under the bridge made it sound more like a thunderclap. But the amused boy seemed to realize their plight, for he got up and walked away, taking his bright new ship with him. "At last," said Baldmoney. "Now perhaps we can escape." Only 5 minutes later, and the Dragonfly was again proceeding upstream. The sunshine had given way to clouds now, but there was a good breeze to fill the sail. Not bothering to change out of their wet clothes or to have any food, the gnomes had loaded the boat and pushed off as quickly as possible. "You know, I can't understand that human," said Sneezewort. "He saw us quite clearly, he examined the boat, yet he did nothing." Old Dodder looked up at Sneezewort.
"The reason he did nothing, Sneezy, is because he's a child, and he believes in us."
Several hours later, and the Dragonfly was running before a very strong wind. The folly had widened now, and Baldmoney, who was standing forward, suddenly called out, "Look ahead!" Before them stretched the greatest expanse of water they had ever seen, so great that on the far side it reached right up to the sky. Now on the open water, and the wind became even stronger. Above them and all round, the sky grew dark, and the Dragonfly began to rock alarmingly.
"Oh, dear. I don't feel very well,"
groaned Dodder. The wave had broken right over the boat, soaking everything.
"Down with the sail!"
shouted Baldmoney. But there was no time. A sudden gust of wind knocked him off his feet into the bottom of the boat. And when he looked up, he saw to his horror that the sail had been carried away. They were now driving through the heaving water under bare poles. Spray flew in all directions, and of land there was no sight at all. The gnomes lay sobbing in the boats, too ill to move as the wind roared at them in fury and the sky grew darker and darker. This, they thought, must surely be the end. But they were so ill, they didn't even care.